Okay, folks, we're back in session. A little housekeeping here. So I don't want to shortchange this next topic. So with the council's permission, if this takes an hour, that's fine with me. It's time well spent. But then I'm going to ask that we, fortunately, some of the people aren't here, that the updates for council goals be pushed to next study session, okay? Because I would like to end the study session, wrap it up by 8:30 and go to the executive session at 8:30 and then hopefully be out here by 8:45. I just see the council goals just going on. So, okay, with that, we're going to turn to our council vice president, Jane Rewolowski, to have a continued council discussion on the multifamily tax exemption program, with the understanding that this is not going on an agenda bill item next week. So this is just more discussion. Jane, you got the floor.
Thank you. Christine is going to help me with slides. I think there might have been a couple changes in the packet, so these are all clean slides now. So we start off with the history of the MFTE program, and then we want to review the MFT program performance, discussion of proposed modifications, and then the next steps that we want to do. So this has been up for council discussion numerous times. Revisions were considered in 2017, 18, and 22, and very few of the revisions were accepted by council. So one of the first ones was eliminating the 8-year tax exemption, and that is the exemption that has no focus on affordability at all. And then the next one that was considered was removing the moderate income allowance for the 12-year exemption. And it was just have a low income option, and that was not adopted. There was other changes to focus on low income households. One of the biggest ones was to consider the difference between what we understood to be the county AMI and change it to the city of Bremerton AMI. And they council did adopt in 2021, effective 2022, which allowed for the exemption to add a 20-year option. So like an example is somebody who is on an 8-year exemption is now currently allowed to get a 12-year exemption if some of the units are considered moderate and low income. Okay. So next slide. Okay, so the 12-year exemption requires at least 20% of the units are rented or sold as affordable housing. And that I was unaware that that was an option that the state allowed, was to sell 20% of the units to affordable. And then there's criteria that how long it has to stay at that affordable rate. Like somebody couldn't go buy it at a lower income and then turn around and sell it and get all the equity a couple of years later. It has to stay in place for 99 years. It has to, if it's rented as affordable housing. Currently, we have
those are
these
minimums.
Yes. So these are our listed designated residential target areas for MFTE. But there is the state does allow for as few as 4 units to be considered, which that may induce people to do some infill, some of our more established neighborhoods, and something that could be more manageable for a very small developer to do. Or somebody has an oversized lot, they might want to add 4 ADUs And that would be allowable under this. Under, if we take that option. The state has lots of options that we haven't considered. So as of May of 25, these are the current, this page, and then there's another page of units that are either getting it or have applied for it. Some of them are still in the application period. Their building permits are under review. They have conditional, but those conditionals do expire. So we have to consider that. So right now we have 4 units getting 12-year, but I'm not sure about this, Anne. When Spyglass now has an additional 12 years, is that included in that 4? It is.
Oh, and they're not units, they're developments, they're projects, right?
Right,
Right,
right.
Yeah.
those are developments.
They are.
Does that then become a 20? If they extend from the 8 to, and add on 12, does that become a 20 and it has the 99-year requirement?
No, because they're just renting.
Okay,
No,
well, but that 99-year is for rentals too, right? If they have a 20-year
Yeah, if I get the 20-year.
at the initial,
at the
okay,
initial.
okay.
So,
Can't upgrade later. So,
You can extend like Spyglass from the 8
Right.
and then add 12, but that doesn't mean you're a 20 with the 99 year.
designation.
Yeah.
Can you then do a 20? Under the current rules, can you then do a 20-year or go from an 8 to a 20-year?
no,
You have to choose 20 at the onset,
You can do 8, 8 and 12.
and we have that in our code, we have the 20.
oh yeah, we have 8 and 12.
Well, that's 20.
And 20.
And,
And have
and
22.
That's what I'm saying,
And 20.
the 20-year
So-
designation,
so if you start with the 20,
you stay with the 20. I'm just thinking about like, this is funny, some people don't like my gym membership, right? Like, you can upgrade and downgrade anytime you want, but,
you lose the pricing.
And the
I did
thing
lose
with
the
the
price.
99-year covenant is it makes it much harder to sell than to another owner.
So Jane, do you want discussion now, or do you want to go through your
I
presentation?
think we can,
Sorry.
I think it's easier for everybody just to talk through and get.
Okay, so I do have an observation.
Sure,
You have 8 and you have 12, you don't have a 20. I think it's obvious. The 20 is too onerous and no developers are gonna do a 20. This is just a layman with just like, there's not gonna happen. If I want to do a 20, I'm gonna do with what one developer apparently has just recently done. I'm gonna do an 8, and then after my 8 is up, smart thing, I'm gonna go do a 12.
Right.
20% of my units gotta be low income, but I'm using the Kitsap AMI, and I'm looking at the delta between how much rent I'm losing and how much property tax I'm saving. And in their case, I would assume they said, the delta is in my favor.
Yes,
Go this way, so they
Yeah.
did that. The 20 is an option, but it's not realistic. I don't know.
right.
I wonder if any organization in the state or any organization in Washington State has done it. That'd be interesting.
So one thing too, I've heard many discussions about the AMI. Well, that's not the unit of measure they're using, because the AMI for this Bremerton, Seattle, Bremerton, Silverdale, Bainbridge, HUD is using a number of $124,000, where the AMI for that area, when you look at the census data, is approximately 100,000.
I have
So
a
they use-
question about that. Because I was thinking about the, as you can imagine, I've been thinking about this
Yeah.
a lot. Census, is that self-reported, that income? Because census is self-report, right? When they take census, I tell them how many people are living in my household, and I tell them my household income.
Well, how do you think HUD gets
HUD,
their
you have to
number?
verify it. HUD is, you
Well,
bring paycheck stubs in.
When I filled out my,
back, there you go.
when I filled out my census, it said that was
It's
By
self-reported.
law. Yeah, but you're breaking the law if you lie about it.
Let's,
You know what I'm
I mean,
saying?
yeah, but do we
it's
believe?
verifiable with HUD and not verifiable by census data. Census data is self-reported anecdotal, which anecdotal is still
Well,
data.
who
but it's not the
knows?
most reliable.
Yes, yes. I just wanted clarification on it. Might not even be that big of a deal.
HUD's AMI for Silverdale Bremerton has increased by over 32% in the past 5 years.
Mhm.
So in 2021, when it first, and that's for 4 people, okay,
Thank you, I was gonna ask that.
4-person household.
Okay.
Okay, so that's increased quite a bit, quite rapidly. Have the next slide.
We
Christine.
really should look at that, though. Again, this is paradigm shift. I'm just gonna offer a paradigm shift. That's a good thing. That means that people overall are making more money.
Doesn't mean people in Bremerton. are
It doesn't
making
mean
money.
people in
No,
Bremerton are.
But, well, except they might be. We can't, you know what I'm saying? Let's,
It also doesn't mean they're not.
that's
Yeah,
right.
So
There's
That's
no
right.
data point.
we want to
that's
compare it
not-
to the state and national averages too, and account for
Yeah.
inflation and trends, yeah.
Yeah.
3 years ago, 40% of Bremerton households were earning less than $40,000. So there's some
I don't think
non-anecdotal data for you.
Yeah,
We have a very high percentage of disabled people, of seniors,
Folks who are receiving resources in general, who are
I think
income
we're
qualified for
really aware of
resources.
them.
there you
I
go,
think
that's much
we're-
better language.
I think this council has been very aware of.
Oh, we're not saying that, we're just saying like the data point that we should be crafting, the MFTE should be more refined for Bremerton. I think that's. Jane's
Definitely,
point, Yeah.
definitely.
okay.
And
I can't even figure out, there's a map in this packet. Okay, so HUD has a map of their MSA, their metropolitan statistical area. It does include Bainbridge Island. It includes Bremerton, it includes Port Orchard. But there's portions of the county it doesn't include, so I don't know why they do that. So, okay.
Is it unincorporated? Is it county?
Yeah, there's parts of the county
That are included in the map?
Yeah, but not all of them. Okay,
We really need an answer on that. We need to come to some consensus about what type of figure we're gonna use.
I think
Yep.
I understand why it's HUD called that MSA. I mean, I was former federal employee. That stands for Metropolitan Statistical Area. And so they're considering Bremerton, Silverdale, Bainbridge metropolitan. If you're out in Seebeck, that's not metropolitan, that's rural by definition. I mean, that's just the layman's.
Okay.
That's what the MSA is.
okay, that makes sense. Okay, can we have the next slide, please? So this is how they adjust. So if they have, they're starting with 124,000. So for one person, they're saying you do 0.7%, which means their AMI estimate is 87,000. Right.
Mhm.
3 people, 0.9, so they're saying that family income is 111,000. 4 people, 124,000. So that is how they adjust for their AMI. So they're saying that the AMI for the whole metropolitan area is $87,000.
Jane, are you saying that right now, if I put in my application, throw an example, this is a spyglass for that low income one, all I have to do is make less than, if I was single, all I have to do is make less than 87,100 and I could qualify for that unit?
Cool.
No, that's just a question. Because
No,
we're
because
using,
It's a
we're
percentage
using,
of the AMI.
It's a percentage of that AMI.
No, it's.
So there's a chart.
oh, okay, so
Percentage
this
of
is the
the-
This is
adjustment.
100% of AMI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then there's a percentage that's
Yeah,
applied on
Percentage
that.
of that.
Yeah.
that's-
Oh,
And that's something else we could adjust that we found out that,
Yep,
and
we can
Just-
adjust almost everything.
anecdotally, I
Okay, here we
believe I heard that, the owner of Spyglass would be receptive to changing, to adding a Bremerton adjusted AMI to their criteria.
Well, that'd be awesome,
Yeah,
because I asked the city attorney if we could modify that, and she said contract's already been
Yeah.
signed, if I understood it correctly. So if they did, that would be wonderful, but by law, they don't. at this
okay, I see
point.
what you're saying. Yeah,
So if you're one person, 60% of the AMI to get into Spyglass, you'd have to make $52,000 or less, right?
Or less,
or no,
Or less,
or more.
or less
less.
to be income qualified.
if it's 60%.
If it's 60%, we,
Isn't that the threshold you have to hit?
No, where are
You
we
have to be
now?
more than 52 a year.
Okay.
60%?
Mhm.
Okay.
So would they take somebody who was making 26 grand a year?
they absolutely could.
Mhm.
And they would feel sure that person would pay the rent?
I don't know.
Okay.
So here's my
They can.
question, because I thought if your income was lower, then your rents are lower. It's also a percentage of what your gross income is. Am I not correct?
Isn't
So
that,
in that example, if your income was $52,000, you'd pay whatever percentage of that up to for your rent versus if your income was 26,000.
That's
In other
only
words-
with vouchers.
No, yeah.
That's
Okay, so that's
Section
not
With
true.
Vouchers.
Yeah.
That's
We're
actually,
just using HUD. It's
Okay,
not
that's
really
fine.
a
So their
funded
rent is,
program.
if the income qualified unit is 1,500, it doesn't matter if you make 52,000 or 26,000.
It's
Right,
like, if
okay.
the developer or the management organization is subsidizing that. They're eating that. Okay,
Right.
so instead of them, like VHA and others, when they have vouchers, they get money from HUD for the
Right,
difference.
Right.
This
gotcha.
is the developer or the management organization
Yeah, it's
subsidized.
the delta between the market
Yeah.
rate and whatever this.
Yeah. Is that correct, Andrea?
I just want to clarify that this is perhaps a desire table and not what the code requires. The code allows up to 115%
Okay.
down. So this seems like it's a chart about where you might be desiring to go, but the code allows 115% of that 124.
So when I asked where we are, we're at 115.
Oh, sorry.
that's for the 10% moderate,
That'd be
right?
next low moderate,
Right,
but that's 80 to 115.
the moderate.
Okay,
Moderate is 80 to 115, low income, below 80.
right.
And this was really.
And I heard that Tacoma or Spokane that was on the call, they found their sweet spot at 70.
But
They
they
were
also
saying
have a
that.
lower AMI than we
Yeah,
did,
yeah.
which is amazing. Looking at this chart I sent out, there's only 2 counties that have a higher AMI than Kitsap in the whole state.
It's higher than Manhattan.
Yeah.
I'd really like to find that sweet spot where we can, where developers or, agents can say, yeah, we can make that work. We can make a 60% or a 70% work. Whatever that, I would like to get like consensus. So that everybody's committed to this, everybody's on the same team. I think the rub's gonna come, with what impact that'll have on applications. However, I think that's the direction I'm hearing that we wanna go. I just don't wanna get it so low that, of a requirement that we end up not getting any.
So that builds on my question I have. Let's say market rate is $2,000. What is the low income rate then? I think it's based on what the applicant says their income.
Oh, I see what you're
That was
saying.
my whole
Yeah,
question.
they will pay that,
Right.
but the owner will not get the rest of it from HUD like
Correct.
they usually
No, I
do.
understood that.
Yes.
And so there is a
It'll be a
difference between
third of-
an applicant with higher income versus an applicant with lower income, because the landlord is gonna get less rent
Yes.
for the low income
Yes.
person.
Yep,
Okay.
so most likely they're gonna pick. If I was a,
So it is the same.
if I was a
Section 8.
capitalist, I would say, if I have to go with 80% AMI, and I had two applicants, one who's stating their income is $69,699 versus another applicant who had the same good references that made 50,000, who are you gonna pick?
Well, but those set asides are where we have some control. So that my understanding is so that those 10, 20%, whatever it is, we can specify, you have to provide this amount of housing for those meeting these income criteria. And that's where we can lower it from what, 115 or whatever. I think we have some.
But what I'm saying is, right now, in HUD, they're saying 80% of AMI is 69.7, right? But the way our program is set up, where it's 115%, that means somebody making $130,000 would qualify for that 80% of AMI, right? Is that what we're looking for? Is that what our community is looking for?
Well, and remember this, I think this is a really good time for me to just make a point. Okay, in our goals, this city, this council, staff, everybody does not have an economic development lens. We have no staff dedicated to it. We don't look at our tourism that way. This MFTE is not simply an affordable housing strategy. It's to make sure we have enough affordability and availability for all income strata. So we have a lot of young, working class, professional people that need housing. They can't afford a single family house. They want an apartment or multifamily housing. Those are probably going to be the ones that are in the 115 or, whatever. They still deserve housing.
So then why even bother having a 12-year? Just say 8-year, no affordability
So it's
requirements.
I should just kind of focus on facts for now.
Yeah.
And then, but back to Eric's comment. I'm doing some quick searching, and I think the rent is tied not to each individual tenant's income, but to 30% of what the qualifying is at. I think it's, so if it's right now set to 80% AMI, it's then 30% of that 80%, so it'd be 30% of that number monthly.
So it's 30%, the rent would be 30% of this would be
Divided by 12.
$2,100 versus 30% of this, which would be about $1,500.
Yeah. And so the rent would be the same for every tenant, regardless of each tenant's individual income.
Regardless if this tenant makes
Right, 24,000.
their
Yeah.
rent would be $1,500.
Yeah.
So we're all consistent on the same
That
page, understanding.
accurate?
Oh.
It's a third of the AMI, not a third of the
Everybody's-
income.
It's like tax
rent is-
brackets. It's like
Right.
IRS tax
Rent
brackets.
is like a sliding scale.
Let's say market rate is,
Yeah.
let's say market rate is 2,500. And then you do the formula, so that means the max that the building owner could charge is, let's just say 1,800 or something, whatever the 30% of the 80% comes out to be. Is that right? I just
And
wanna make sure, is that right?
It's 115.
So it's 115, these numbers are much lower than what, the way our ordinance reads right now.
Right.
So here your goal
there's-
is to adopt census and to reduce the AMI to what DCD presented back in 22.
I don't know if there's a goal. I think it's an information.
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to get facts on that, yeah.
I do
Right.
remember that presentation.
And if we're over 100% now, even going down to the AMI, not the census, would be a big step in the right direction.
It would be a big step, but I mean, what is our goal for giving developers an extra 4 years of no taxes? Is our goal just to get them to build? Or is it to get them to build and give at least a small percentage of Bremerton families?
Can
I
I,
want both.
I wanna harken back to what Denise brought up at the very beginning, which said HUD is verifiable, and census is not. I wanna make sure that we do have an accurate data point. But what I remember from the conversation about HUD was that it has to include it. Is it called an MSA or is it called?
It's supposed to include their utilities too, that 30%, not just rent.
Which census would not capture that.
And neither would using this formula.
And this is HUD AMI?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm missing the part about, I'm specifically, that the utilities, whatever, has nothing to do with the fact that we need a data point that is fact-based and verified. And
Could I for a second?
yeah, you know what I'm asking about the HUD
I
combining.
think it's the fact, what is important about this table is to show that you've got an AMI, which is the most reliable data source for us to use.
Yeah.
The census data is a good comparison point to see where are we hitting on this spectrum of the AMI. And what she's showing in the slide is that basically Bremerton's salaries are 17% lower than the AMI.
Okay.
So right now, the code is established for 115% of AMI and lower. So I think the question before you is, how do you correct for the Bremerton factor, which is what we've talked about, to pick the right range of numbers? I think this debating about what the rents actually are, I think what's important on this slide is to give the observation that in reality, Bremerton salaries are much lower by a factor of 17%. So perhaps if you want to do an adjustment, that's where you start, you look at that 17% difference, and then you start looking at the AMI numbers and choosing maybe a different range. That's what's important to you as a group to move forward. So I think this debate about if 30% of this,
Gotcha,
I think the question for you now is to look at the incomes, just to make this conversation go a little bit easier, just to wrap your head around. What is it that you'd like to pick to work from?
Well, but it seems like then that what you're suggesting is that we go with the census data.
You really need to go with the census data because
Yeah.
you need to go with the AMI data because
Okay.
it's published, it's updated, it's a reliable data source. You've got to use the MSA. And then what part of the MSA, what percentage you use, that's what's important.
And is that what we get from the census data?
The census data
Is a data point.
Of the demographics of Bremerton itself.
Okay.
It might be, is it take the tables to measure and evaluate an application? We need to use the MSA data. What range of the MSA data we use, that's what's up to you. And what she's showing here is that census tells us we're at least 17% lower than what the MSA shows.
So at the very least, we want to lower it 17%, at the very least.
That's what you want
But-
to
Right?
consider.
Okay,
But
that's
the-
just a starting point.
Right, but I think the easier thing to consider is the percentage of AMI, because are we gonna come back and change this? Like, what if next year the data points show that we're 19% below, or that we're only
We should
13% below?
we should look at it sporadically. I mean,
We're
is it-
supposed
is
to.
it every year?
We're supposed
Is
to
it-
look at it every 2 years, council,
Okay,
for the law.
And so we had a 2022 presentation and was there. And I'm sorry, I don't remember. It was a little bit of a blur.
it's after I remember a little. bit.
And we agreed on some things and didn't agree on others. I was on finance committee at the time. And I think we made a recommendation that wasn't taken up by the rest of the council. And that, am I wrong in remembering this?
They added the 20%.
No, that's correct.
2022.
20-year.
2022. What were the changes that came, because there was a good,
Well, my-
recommendation from
There, yeah, there
staff.
was a slide, there's a
Correct.
slide there.
My recollection is there was recommendations, we gave feedback, and then it didn't come back until council itself had to bring it back up. And then we passed,
Yes.
I remember passing the 20-year. And then there was one other item I felt like in my.
There
head,
was,
make
it was, there
easier for
was
staff.
specifically,
Yeah.
Garrett had brought us the presentation that,
Mhm.
I mean, talking about the
Bremerton factor.
the salary, the Bremerton
Go back to
factor,
this
the
Yeah,
salary.
you're right.
I'm sorry.
Anna's right.
You're pointing, what's going on?
I was gonna say, yeah, we can give you the PowerPoint presentation that was done last time. And
Yeah.
we delivered all the products that the council wanted. There was certain data that we do not have expertise to produce, so it was not produced. So the notion that we didn't bring back something, we did everything within our ability.
Oh,
to do so.
I don't know that I don't know.
I don't
that
think that's what she's saying. I think she's saying that there were certain things that finance committee
We're supposed to look at.
or told reported back to council that this was.
And then we
finance
just
committee's-
kept pushing it off and pushing it off. We never
Because-
really brought it back up in council.
But council accepted some of the recommendations, right?
Right.
Yeah, if you could send us that slide, that'd be great. And then we
So
could go back to
I-
this
I-
presentation.
But I think we have, I think we would have consensus over lowering our current level as a first step of 17%. I mean, that's data qualified. And it's a step in the right direction. So do we have consensus? And then we can
I feel
go
like we're
deeper.
jumping the gun here. Let's try and understand all the facts in the
Okay.
table. I feel like we still don't have consensus on what the actual facts are.
Yeah, we got more of the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I gotta just, I'm actually feeling more confused now.
Now.
than
Yes.
I was.
before.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna ask this, but I'm just gonna say that I almost feel like I'm getting confused over now who qualifies and if they're at what level, how does that play? I would almost like to hear like how a person qualifies, gets it, and then go through that to see how that feels for like equity of a person seeking, and then use that to help me decide how we should set limits or whether we should allow it or not. So that kind of, I feel like we're all over, and I think that's kind of what happened before is this, there's
Exactly.
all these
Agreed.
percentages and these acronyms and like,
And it just
and-
went over our.
and we could almost just slow down and almost just say like, okay, we agreed that this is the thing, and then this is the next piece.
How about if we take the current ordinance reads
Mhm.
and do it on what HUD's adjustment factors are and give you a precise chart of how much rent people would have to pay based on how much their income was and if they qualify.
And I think you and I've talked about this, but like, if like, I'm gonna make up magic numbers here, but if
Yeah.
we found out that, Bremerton residents in these affordable units are benefiting $1 million a year, but the developers are benefiting $3 million a year, like,
Mhm.
is that worth it or not? I mean, there's a long-term thing for the housing, but we have to weigh what seems fair.
Another
To
point to
everybody.
that, though, another point to that is that when developers build multifamily housing that are rentals, they don't see profit on that.
Right.
It's not like developers of single-family homes that are sold. They see profit from rent,
Yeah.
okay, over a period of time. So initial investors do not get their money,
Yeah.
except
I-
over
I
the course.
understand that, yeah.
So it's always
But-
important to remember that.
But also, then the piece I was saying is that as a city, increasing the housing stock, it also has a long range return. So even though we may
Yes.
have given up eight years of revenue off that spot,
Yes.
we've got I don't know what the life expectancy is.
Actually,
30
they're
years
now
or whatever.
75 years. I was
So
corrected.
so
Yeah.
anyways, you get okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to just say that I'm more confused, but
I think the rest of Jane's, this tax impact, because what you said was what I was thinking all along being on council is that, okay, the city is foregoing the tax money. But the truth of the matter is, go ahead, Jane, explain the
The truth of the
slide.
matter is, it's getting shifted to all the other taxpayers. And that group of taxpayers is getting smaller and smaller. So right now, the average house in Bremerton is taxed based on a value of 300, right around $350. $350,000, right? So that means that each household is paying an extra $80 in Bremerton. And they're paying it in other parts of the county too. It's not clear to me if everybody in the county pays, but others for this. So like if Port Orchard starts up their MFTE program again, we'll be paying higher taxes to cover their MFTE. And we're paying more, obviously, in Bremerton. So, I mean, in my opinion, it's great to get new housing, but somebody's got to pay for police and fire that all these new buildings aren't paying for.
I understand that, and yet, one thing that I'm working with Ann on tallying, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars of housing in Bremerton that are owned by nonprofits. They pay, they don't pay taxes.
Neither
on
do
that.
churches.
Okay.
Well, the school district.
So
School
I
district.
think that's really important for us as a council to understand, especially when we get challenged on how little we're doing on providing affordable housing. Wait a minute, that, we're already investing these in missed taxes on all these properties. So that's another figure to bring into this that I hope to have soon.
But also you need to think about
They don't
those
even report it to the county.
those properties also are getting much, much lower rents that aren't being reimbursed at all, right?
Can I?
So if you're living in one of Agape's apartments that they rent out to people, if they're renting somebody.
Oh, yeah,
for-
they're getting much less.
Yeah, much less.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
much
And
less
yet,
than any
The
market rate.
services are still required.
Right.
Yeah.
I have just a question, fact, I mean, there can't be any occupancy on these units they can't have any openings, do they? I'm curious what the vacancy rate of the units that qualify for
Well, there's very few of them.
I
There's
know,
less than 80.
right. So
So I'm guessing they're pretty well occupied.
you're guessing, but you don't know, right?
I don't know.
Got about 4 more slides. We got 20
Yeah.
minutes left.
Okay.
Okay,
We could talk about this for days.
Kind of next slide, please. Christine.
let's not.
So this is the chart showing what average rents are. So we compared Bremerton, and Bainbridge and Port Orchard and Polesville. So we're the light blue.
We're at the bottom.
For,
teal.
this is for,
Yeah,
one,
I
So
wonder why there
let's-
was a big
So
drop.
Jeff,
in rents
is
in Bainbridge.
colorblind.
thank you.
Yes.
Oh, I'm
It would
sorry.
be,
Yeah, we're good.
this is
No, it's fine.
very
That's actually
similar
pretty
in
decent.
tone.
Yeah,
So it's this
Yeah,
right
thank
here.
That's us in Port Orchard,
Yes.
intertwined,
Yeah.
like loving snakes.
Something, I have a quick anecdote. I was talking with somebody else about MFTE in Bainbridge Island. And their AMI actually benefits Suquamish tribal members, or the Suquamish, because the AMI is so much higher that folks are making much lower across the bridge, that it benefits them. It doesn't necessarily, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily do that for us.
The yeah, but number one, they don't have the 8-year in Bainbridge Island.
Okay, they only have 12-year.
Uh-huh.
Well,
They have the 12 and the 20.
how's this, this calculated, is it average of all the housing units, is it average for a 1-bedroom apartment?
Rental market.
Rent. It's rental
Right,
market.
rent of what?
Market rate and affordable are included.
but you're
Right,
asking
right.
1-bedroom, 2-bedroom,
Right.
3-bedroom, 2-bath
Yeah,
with a dishwasher and a backyard.
if you compare 2 cities
Yeah.
and one city has
With
a ton of
mature
1-bedroom
landscaping.
apartments and the other one has a ton of 3-bedroom apartments, you're gonna get different average rental rates, so.
Yeah.
I just wanna
This
make sure
is
we're
just
apples to
A
apples.
small snapshot. Okay, next slide, please.
So, and I get,
Thank you, Jeff.
So currently the
cooking.
sunsets in 2031, but in reality it sunsets in 2051. If we grant a 20-year in 2031. But the state legislature, it seems like they go and modify it almost every year. So they could modify this so it goes till the end of time.
Well, in
Currently.
the state legislature seems very supportive of the MFTE programs.
Well, Department of Commerce is very supportive of it. Yes.
Well, the legislature did some very, like, they're requiring MFTEs in
Yeah.
many areas.
They see it as a tool.
99-year leases, automatic renewal.
Yeah.
Mhm. So these are possible program modifications. We could remove the 8-year. We could revisit the criteria of existing for the additional 12-year.
To extend them?
To whether or not we
The
want to be able to
criteria.
do that, if we want,
Yeah.
if we still want
Yeah.
somebody to do an 8 and then get 12 years afterwards. Understand the impact of shifting to low income only on affordability and growth. Consider the best approach for defining a low income, study the overall tax impact as compared to the public benefit. And decide the approach to gather input from the community. I have it on one of my next district meetings. And I think it's something that everybody who has a district meeting should have a conversation with their constituents to find out how all of them feel. Yes.
But I'd just like to add, oh, I'm sorry. I hadn't realized you weren't done.
Oh, that's okay. Oh, what did you?
Just another thing we learned at the webinar was that many cities that participated, they don't automatically renew MFTEs. They recommend to council.
One jurisdiction said that. I think it was Spokane.
Okay. Nonetheless, it's something that can happen.
And they're pretty involved in MFTE.
They are, and affordable housing, very involved in making.
I would rather set the criteria so that then it doesn't have to come to council every time.
There's a reason why we have a hearing examiner and that stuff for the council. You don't want to bring politics into this. Oh my
Well,
goodness.
It's also true that in many jurisdictions, like Hallsville, for instance, the administrative hearing examiner makes recommendations to council. Their word is not final.
Sure.
It-
Understood.
So everybody does it.
Yeah. Welcome diversity.
Are we any further than when we started?
Yes.
I see what I still think is not clear. In my mind, two things. It's actually still not clear on how the rent is set. And I'm getting different answers as I Google. And so I'm looking at here, not you're back there. Do you have clarity on if the rent is per person's income, is it fixed for a building, and how is it different between the low and moderate?
Based on the AMI. So
It is-
if the AMI is 115, then affordable housing is 30% of your income for rent and utilities. So you would expect to see that the rent would be a little bit less than whatever, 30% of whatever 115.
Of the person's
I-
income
that's- no,
of the
it's
AMI.
the AMI for
Of
the
the
area.
AMI.
So like, I guess if I had a building with a bunch of 1-bedroom apartments and that all those apartments qualify, the rents in theory would be, they were all rented on the same day, it would all be the
They have to
same.
range from 60 to 115 because you have to have a mix of low and the moderate income.
Right.
So it's gonna be that range of from 60 to 115, or it could be less than 60.
But there's a minimum that they're all gonna hold. They're not gonna be like, oh, we're gonna do more units for this affordable price. We're so generous, we're gonna add 5 more units on. There's
That's a
minimum bid.
reminder, this is brand new housing. That's something that I've been thinking about as I've been thinking about this over and over and over again. And that is, I qualify for this, folks. I mean, I'm at a
Me too, let's
situation.
apply.
I do too.
We qualify,
Me
right?
too.
I don't,
I got the first
almost
step.
like we're projecting an expectation that I deserve, to live in Spyglass, at a certain income level. And I think, market rate, brand new market rate housing, to put an affordability clause in there, I think is a big deal. I think it's great.
I think 20 years of not having to pay taxes is a big deal.
The
Also,
20 years required, well, unless it's
No,
an
they-
8 or 12 year
they
exemption.
have an 8 and a 12.
If we got
That's
you
20
rid
years.
of the age, then, we wouldn't have that problem.
Right.
And that's one thing that's. on
We
the-
already
For next-
talked about the back of the envelope.
Right, so for next time, I feel like an example of the rents would be very illustrative, like even if the real building or a fake building. You'd be like, these are the kind of market level rents, these are the moderate, these are the low. I just feel like it'd be helpful. And then the tax shift. And I'm looking here at the Department of Commerce has a 2-page sheet on tax shift, and I've read this before, I'm reading it again, and it's still like, it's very complicated. And it totally
It is.
depends on your local jurisdiction, and like, I'm sorry, I didn't say major kudos out loud for gathering all this.
Oh, for sure.
Well, we got the
But I-
information from
yeah.
how our local auditor does do it, and that's what was in here.
So is it? I mean, on one hand, I can look at it and say, okay, we're still getting the same level of tax revenue if MFT is enacted, but folks in the county are paying more. So we're essentially getting
That's a good-
county
that's an
county
interesting
residents to help subsidize our city thing, which is
Yes.
point.
Kinda cool.
And we're-
That's why the county is looking at
representing
MFT, so they
Remington
can get it
residents
from.
solely. I mean,
And the
We are
county is
also
also subsidized.
Per the new state law, the county cannot do 8 years.
But let me ask you, okay, so based on,
I don't know.
if I can build off what Jeff just said, then we're not as a city, we're not giving out a penny of revenue because of this program. What we basically said is, we're gonna come together as a community, and every citizen, every homeowner is gonna throw $80 in a pot. We're gonna get new housing built, and we're gonna give people affordable rates. I mean, you know,
And we're gonna do
That's
that for the
public
next
benefit,
20 years.
because we keep saying that we're not getting money to pay the police department, but you're telling me we are getting money to pay the police department, and I'm chipping in $80, and I'm willing to do that, and you're chipping in $80, but you might be unhappy about it. But it's this greater good.
I like
kind of thing
people.
and I might live in the
But the
county,
thing
but
is-
shipping in to have affordable.
In the
The thing is,
community,
we're only
and keep
supposed
those
to
people
be-
out of your community.
By law, we're only supposed to raise property tax 1% a year,
Mhm.
correct?
Right.
Well, by using this MFTE, we are raising everybody's property tax more than 1% every year. And it's gonna get,
We're not doing it. That's the county assessor. Call them in.
Well, and I don't
This program
understand, it
is.
certainly isn't broken down in the assessor's bills.
well, no, they're not gonna break it down, but she
Some
broke it
kind of
down,
hidden-
she broke it down for us and by
I
giving
still
us.
don't
the-
understand, it's not clear. to me.
$80 on the one,
Doesn't make sense to me.
based on a 386, whatever that was, is not,
Oh, I got it in my packet, right?
it's not gonna raise the motion 1%.
I would really love to revisit the 2022 proposal from DCD.
We have
I,
a separate like lunch meeting about this to go through. it.
I think
So-
there's a little rule about that.
you're not doing that.
I can know, like
Let's go back to
Tuesday.
that.
So building on what Jeff pointed out just a few minutes ago, for me to make an informed decision, I don't know if it's proprietary, but I would like to just pick out one housing example that has a 12-year program. Find out, tally up all the market rate rents, and then their rents that are less than market rate. See what that delta is, and then see what their savings is on the property tax. And I'd just like to see,
Yeah.
is that number a 3 to 1? Is that a 2 to 1? Is that a 1 to 1?
Mhm.
And then from there, I would look at, do I want to tweak my formula on the AMI thing to make it more closer to a 1 to 1 ratio if it is a 3 to 1 or a 4 to 1, to make it fair. That's only if I want to keep this thing. As a taxpayer, I'm finding out that I'm paying whatever it is, $160 a year on my home, whatever it is, to subsidize this, and I'm only getting 68 quote unquote on affordable houses. And we found out it's 115% of AMI, so it's not really for really low income people. That's 5.6% of the total units. No, I understand. So, but But I also counterbalance that with my opinion, the legislative intent of this was not primary for affordable housing.
right.
It was to provide
Middle
for increasing housing, not the middle, missing middle, increasing housing in areas that need redevelopment. And that has happened in downtown Bremerton. And I'm convinced that we wouldn't have all this progress that we have here if we didn't have MFTE. So be careful. And when you look at the number of projects, initially, that was true. Almost all the developers, well, I'd say 70% of the developers picked the 8-year versus the 12. You start messing with this 12-year formula and you keep the 8, they're all going to shift to the 8. That's going to tell you that right now. If you lower the rents, they're going to go to the 8. So do you want to get rid of the 8, just have the 12? And are you certain that anybody will take the 12? We already know anecdotally, no one's taking the 20. No one's going to take the 20,
Right.
right? But will they still take the 12? And that's where we need to have a back of the envelope analysis on one apartment building and tell me what that delta is. So I can make an informed decision on whether I can tweak this and they can still. pencil it
Okay,
out.
more than
We
one,
could add-
everyone possible, because I did this.
Okay, everyone
so
possible then.
2022, I did my stab at doing that for the 606, but I know
Yeah.
the 606 is also special because it's a garage. And
Okay.
so, yeah, for anyone listening in this room or online, there's more data, the better, and the more building examples, the
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
So
Well, and
no
I would,
conclusion for tonight, but that's, I think, where the council would like to have,
Okay.
make an informed decision.
And is it
Yeah.
possible to get someone from, like someone from Commerce to
No.
do Q&A or? Mhm.
I watched the whole thing yesterday.
Yeah.
And they're very much 100% in favor of MFTE.
well,
And I
it
don't
was the
think that's-
MFTE staff. It was a
Yes.
peer meeting. It was we were the only council members on the call.
No, we weren't. They were from other cities.
It was primarily staff. It's a peer. It's like reporting and stuff like that. It wasn't.
No, I'm just thinking about the tax is still not clear.
But instead, I love the idea of penciling it all out, you figuring it all out. I'll tell you who I want to hear from. I want to hear from a developer.
That's fine.
I want to hear from a developer who pencils this stuff out on a regular basis. And if we did this, if we got rid of the 8-year and we went with the 12-year, where is I want the sweet spot.
That's not an unusual request. Years
Yeah,
ago,
they'll be there.
we had Wes Larson here for a study session. We can arrange that if he or a representative so chooses, or one of the other
That's important.
applicants.
I mean, there is so
That's
much
fine.
bias on this council against developers. I mean,
I think
You're
you need to
refusing to
watch,
meet.
nope, I'm gonna push back
What are
on
you talking
that.
about?
you're refusing to meet with the president of the builders.
So hang on, let's time out. Let's get
Yeah,
back
I
to
think
this.
we need to be careful
Please.
about making accusations against each other.
So,
Yes.
yeah. Anyway,
Because
do
everybody
we-
right now is pretty darned angry. It's really easy to let it spill over.
I'm not angry,
I'm
I'm,
not angry.
I'm,
Not about
I'm
this.
confused.
Not about this.
But I really do appreciate,
Right.
I really appreciated what Jeff did back in 2022, which is just a rough back of the envelope, you called it, right? And I appreciate what Eric is saying about let's pencil it out with a specific unit, and see what the rents are gonna be. What I appreciate is that there's an emphasis on wanting equity for our citizens but we're not talking about a lot of units. And we're not talking about a lot of units of equity. What we're talking about really is gaining back some of that, some of the taxes that we're missing out on. But what I understand to be true is that we're still getting the taxes because they're being deferred to other people. So we're not missing out on taxes. So is it about equity or is it about generating revenue? We're spinning our wheels. We could be doing other things.
Or is it about having more housing? You know, when you say it's only a few units, I've got, what, Garrett, how many
Only a few
units in
units
Blue
that
Ridge?
qualify for the reduced.
Right, but that's
rent.
not what this is only about. We're so
Yeah.
focused on that 10 or 20%. And MFTE is focused on building multifamily housing.
no worries, Denise. So if it was up to me, I'd probably still stick with the 8, but here's where I'm having the problem. We don't name the applicant, but we had someone do the 8, and then because of the changes in 2022, they upped it to a 12. And it's like, whoa, you already built it under the 8. Why did we allow that in 2022? To
Their
me,
grandfather and prior.
no. We passed it in 2022 to open up the 8 plus the 12. I think that may have been a mistake because you built it under the guise of the 8 for this thing to pencil out.
Yeah.
And then when I was first voting in on all this stuff, and I don't think I was here in 2006 but later on, when all these came up, I kept on saying, yeah, but after 8 years, that money, no one's paying any taxes under a false premise, my understanding. It's my understanding was they only paid property tax on the land, but not the building. That's what was, I won't say preached to me, but that was told to me.
Yeah.
Jane, you were there, you were spoken against it, but that's what was told to council.
Yep.
And now we're getting this new information, and I don't have reason to disbelieve it. But now it turns out that the taxpayers have been paying for that all this time. And when I look at only 5 or 6% of the people getting a benefit, and they're not even the low income people, they're the high, I'm upset. That's what my whole deal is. So I don't know what the right answer is. And that's why I go to numbers.
It's still, we now have thousands more housing units in Bremerton because of this.
So do we have
Would we
date?
have had those before? I don't know.
What would housing costs be like if we didn't have these?
Exactly.
Because-
I don't know if we would have had them. I don't know if they would have.
Do we have data to verify that tax rates have gone up since the MFTE program's gone into?
Yeah, it's right here.
Okay, so you got a table that shows, thank you. Oh, sorry,
Read
apologies.
the bottom part.
So Jane, do you have enough
Would
direction
it be
from
20% lower or
council for-
0.2%?
for another study session at another
Yeah.
time? Okay.
0.2% lower.
I appreciate all the work that you did and Ann, all the work that you did as well.
Yeah, Ann and Christine, actually.
And Kylie and DCD staff, I think you had some input in making sure that the presentation was accurate. I appreciate that. Go ahead.
There is a big misconception here.
Sure.
That 20 cents added to the tax that people are paying is not making up the 2.3 million that isn't being paid. So there is a lot
So
of
there is a
tax
gap.
burden that is not being.
Okay, so we're not making
It
it
is
up.
not included when you do the total assessed value. They do not take into account that number, so your total assessed value is lower. So when you apply that to what your levy needs to be, that's where that's making the property owners pay more because you have a smaller denominator. And
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
if you look on that slide, I know it's hard, it's a lot of numbers, but it's showing you the value that they're paying tax on is the property itself and the commercial. And they're not paying tax on that residential piece. So
Right.
there is a large piece that will eventually be taxed when the exemption period is over. But as the county is estimating that, it's about 2.3 million. Or,
Okay, so we are losing out on revenue.
Mhm.
2.3 million a year.
Could you write that down, Ann, please? Well, that 2.3 includes school taxes because the school isn't getting paid.
There's my.
The port is, that's not 2.3 million.
You'd have to-
That went to
Yeah, but
the
look to see
city.
what would come back to Bremerton.
Which
I used to be a CPA.
Wouldn't come back if it wasn't built.
But you've forgotten all. But it is built.
Because of this great program.
That's right. It wouldn't have been built.
So as advertised, council, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And a good point is, you look up, and Heather's got it open here, March 16th, 2022 is the PowerPoint presentation that we gave you. It has the income level, it has the rent. And it has all the
Okay.
tables of the things.
March
that you were
16th,
asking for.
22.
It's
Thank you.
older data, but it
Thank you.
has the rent and the actual rent, some of the projects. That data is all in there from March 16th.
So I'm gonna ask staff just to email that to our council and council do not respond back to that. But that way you guys don't have to go find it.
I'm opening it.
are you ready to report on?
No.
Hey, so as I think a couple of you were missing, but I announced that we wanted to end general council business at 8:30 and go to executive session. So the update on council goals is gonna be pushed again to the next study session. I
I
apologize.
know you were all ready.
So
I
now,
spent over 5
and then unless someone has something they urgently need to talk about, like updates or other briefings, if it's really something the council needs to know about, if not, we're gonna go break into executive session and then
This
close
is
out
kind
meeting.
of time sensitive,
Go ahead.
the environmental stewardship report.
Fine. Also, I'm on low battery, less than 10%.
Okay,
No, wait, the
take that.
environmental responsibility, whoa.
That's on the in the packet, the environmental
But it's
stewardship
time
ad hoc.
sensitive about it.
Yeah, but I said we were gonna push it until 2 weeks from now.
Yes,
Are we gonna,
A report.
is the climate gonna change in 2 weeks?
Yeah, well.
Oh, God, I asked the wrong question. Of course it is. Oh, my God, the look, the look, the look. No, I'm
Got the
sorry,
look.
what is the urgency why we have to?
it
address
doesn't
tonight?
matter why there's the urgency. This council wants the meeting to end at 9, have an executive session. I would, however, like it to come before any other stuff. I'd like it to happen before we are all punchy with fatigue, 2 weeks from now.
Okay, understood. I'll look at the agenda and we'll
Thank you.
try to move things off the agenda and
Okay.
get to this. So I'm sorry for pushing you guys back. I think you understand why we needed to do it. But we'll make it a higher priority for 2 weeks from
Okay,
now. Okay,
just before we're exhausted.
before we're exhausted. And technically, we're not exhausted, but I think around this time maybe is less productive than we'd like to be. Okay, with that, I'm not ending the meeting, but we are going to break for executive session for 15 minutes to discuss potential litigation as allowed under RCW 42.30.110, parentheses 1, parentheses I. Please note that no action is anticipated. So it's at 8:33. We'll reconvene at 8:48.
Got Randall.
Hey, folks, we're done with the executive session. And before we adjourn, just a reminder that the next council meeting will be on Wednesday, June 18th, starting at 5:30 PM in the first floor meeting chambers of the Norm Dix Government Center. Can we open that door in case members of the public want to flood in here for the class?
Open floodgate.
Is there right?
I
Waiting there.
She didn't have
her water bottle.
don't want to exclude the masses. Still waiting, but okay.
Okay.
The public is invited to attend in person or remotely, but anyone wishing to speak in public recognition via Zoom must submit the request through the city clerk by calling 360-473-5323 at least 24 hours prior to the meeting. Folks, this meeting's adjourned. Good night.
Does anybody not want their flyer? I'll